Okay, bonjour. The grammar we're going to be doing is on something that you know from the junior high already pretty well, and that is what's called a phrasal verb or a particle verb. You just learned it when you were learning about how to say you like activities. So if you want to say, for example, I like to go skiing, you say, j'aime faire du ski, for example. And this literally what you're saying is to do of the ski. D'accord? And it's called a phrasal verb because it requires more than just the verb faire in order to express it. Whenever you have an activity like le ski, you have to say of the ski, du ski instead. So faire de, you use faire de when talking about activities that you want to do. You learned that mostly as vocabulary in the junior high. Also when it came to playing games, so jouer au baseball, for example. You're literally saying to play at the baseball. D'accord? So the first one was of, it was with de, d'accord? Of the, du. And the second one was at the, which is au. So you learned it as vocab. It should be pretty easy then to pick it up as a grammar concept. So again, these are called phrasal or particle verbs. A particle is just a combination of a preposition and an article, which is what you're seeing with du and au. De plus le becomes du, a plus le becomes au. They're particles. We also call them phrasal verbs because they're verbs that require more than one word, usually a verb and a preposition. We have many of these in English. So like put down, I want to put something down. But in French, there's very few of them, and they're more simple. So, well, the first one we're going to talk about is faire de, which I said is used before activities like faire du ski. And activities that can be done alone in particular. So what if you have something instead of du ski, you have something feminine like la cuisine? How do you combine de and la? Well, actually you don't. You just say faire de la cuisine, d'accord? And that's good, d'accord? Because de and la do not combine. And literally what you're saying is to do of the cooking or to do of the kitchen. So all of these are idiomatic, meaning they don't translate well back into English. That's kind of a rough translation of idiom, but that's basically what's going on here. Faire du vélo, just like faire du ski is le plus, de plus le, d'accord? And literally what you're saying is to do of the bike, because un vélo is a bike, d'accord? So, je fais du vélo. Second one we're going to look at, we've also looked at the beginning of the lesson, and that's jouer à, which is used before sports. And that's something you knew from the junior high. So if we want to look at hockey, you would say jouer au hockey. Au hockey, to play at the hockey. D'accord? So the idea behind this is a sport is something that's going on with even without you, so you play at it regardless of what's happening. It's kind of a weird thing. You kind of have to adjust your brain to, because the French people look at the word at differently, but that's kind of what the logic is behind you play at the sport instead of play of. Now it's also for any game with rules. So that includes like, je vais jouer à Monopoly. Okay, I'm going to play Monopoly. You say at Monopoly. Not at the Monopoly because it's a proper noun, but so le cache-cache, which you learned for hide and go seek, you play hide and go seek. That is jouer au cache-cache because it's le cache-cache. A plus le becomes o. So literally what you're saying is to play at the hide. That's cache-cache literally means hide. All right, next one. Jouer aux cartes. Let's look at a plural one because cards is a game, but it's plural. D'accord? So when you say jouer, les cartes is the game. You say jouer aux cartes to play at the cards. And so a plus les becomes o with an x. D'accord? And literally what you're saying there is to play at the cards. Okay. There's one I'm not sure that you learned in the junior high, and that's jouer de. D'accord? Um, this is used before instruments. I'm not sure why there's two blanks. It's used before instruments. Voila. Um, maybe personal instruments. Oh, I don't know what would go there. So jouer, you've got le piano, you should know, is masculine. So you jouer du piano. D'accord? It's not jouer à this time. That's just for sports because that's something that happens without you. This time it comes from you, so you play of the piano. D'accord? To play of the piano. Jouer du piano. Likewise, for guitar, which is feminine, la guitare, you say jouer de la guitare, d'accord? To play of the guitar. Okay, now you learned in the first unit this year that la chasse is hunting and la pêche is fishing. Those are activities, but they can't use faire and they can't use jouer, obviously, because they're not technically games. You use for these ones aller. So for la chasse and la pêche, you're going to say aller à. So for hunting and fishing. Je vais à la pêche, je vais à la chasse. So when you say aller à la chasse, that's literally to go to the hunt or to go to the chase as well. Chasse is also chase. So here's one of the activities that you'll have to be able to do, and that is, oh, just choosing the verb. Okay, so this is easy so far. You have to decide whether we're looking at, it'll get a little bit harder because you'll also have to choose the particle. But looking at what verb goes for each of these. So I see au golf. Well, golf is a game. D'accord? I could, if I were clever, also say, well, it's either going to be aller or jouer because those are both followed by a. But I know that golf is a game. D'accord? So I'm going to say, nous pouvons jouer au golf. We can play golf. D'accord? So decide, are we talking about a game? Are we talking about an activity you do yourself? Are we talking about an instrument? Or is it hunting or fishing, in which case it'll be aller. Cool? So you can go ahead and do that. And then you'll check your answers in a Google form later. Next thing we want to look at is particles. The particles are the combinations that you looked at in the junior high. So really, we're only looking at two of these rows because they repeat. You've got faire plus de, so you've got faire du, like faire du ski, faire de la, like faire de la, oh man, it's hard, faire de la natation. You've got de plus L apostrophe, like faire de l'art. And then you've got faire plus a plural, like faire des, I can't come up with something, but that's okay. The second column is jouer, so that's always going to be followed by o if it's a sport, or a la, or a plus L apostrophe, or o. All of I shouldn't have said it's always going to be followed by because it's only if it's a sport or a game with rules. However, because jouer can also be followed by de when there's instruments. So you've got the same thing again, but in terms of memorizing the particles, here they are right here. These 8. Cool. But you do have to memorize that the 3 verbs with their 4 different patterns, as in faire de, jouer au, jouer à, jouer de, and aller à. You have to memorize those. So the second practice that you have to do, you have to look at, well, the verb and the activity if it's the verb jouer. So is it going to be jouer à or jouer de? And then also whether it's masculine, feminine, starts with a vowel or plural. So je vais jouer au baseball. I want to play baseball. Here you have faire, so it's going to be de. And jogging, you should remember those rules about masculine, feminine. and then we're adding plural in. That's easy because it'll end in an S or an X. But joguing, as it ends in no naked E, nor does it end in ON. Remember, ON is another feminine ending. Big hint, hint for number 7. Then it'll be faire du jogging. All right. The last practice is most like what you'll have on your quiz. You have to choose both the verb and the particle. So you don't have to conjugate the verb, so at least there's that relief. So nous allons blank blank flute. So we want to say play of the flute because instruments you play of. D'accord? Jouer de. So I know that this is going to be jouer de la flûte. D'accord? On the first blank, jouer. On the second blank, de la. Next one, you've got pêche. Chasse and pêche both use aller, so you have to remember that. D'accord? Et voilà. Remember that ON endings are feminine, d'accord? And that isme and age endings, like asme, isme, akland, age, are both masculine, d'accord? So that's something to remember as you're doing this, d'accord? Voilà. Okay, that's it. And I'll give you a video with the activities too. Donc, au revoir.